The Witch of Donner Farm. From Harsh Truth. In the 1980s, when I was around 7 or 8 years old, my dad's dad died. He'd lost a long-fought battle against cancer. I hate to say it like this, but I remember my family feeling relieved. The stress and pain my grandfather suffered was finally over. Now, my grandfather had been a man who saved his money, but never came around to spending it. And as my grandmother had long since passed, my father received everything from his father's will. My family received over $60,000 in the will, and after some time planning and discussing with my mother, my dad decided to put it towards his dream home. He wanted to return to the country lifestyle he grew up in. He thought the fields and woods would be a better place to raise my older brother and I. Soon my parents purchased a beautiful ranch-style home with 80 acres of land, much of which still had to be financed, but the inheritance did cover most of it. I remember when I first walked through the doorway of my childhood home. It smelled of well-kept wood, the scent of freshly cut grass wafting in from the open front door. My mother left it up to my brother and I to decide between ourselves which rooms were ours. This would be my first time having a room to myself. I was so excited that I didn't care much which room my brother picked. I wish I would have cared, though. I ended up with the room furthest from my parents' room. This room was sizable, with 2 windows overlooking the fields outside. It also had a big closet that I had no idea what to do with. A lot of space for a boy who kept his clothes in a dresser. It was on the very first day we were there when the strange occurrences began. Having told our parents which rooms we decided on, we started to unpack separately in our rooms. I was sitting in the back corner of the closet of my room, figuring out how to stack my collection of board games, the only things I could think of to place in there at the time. I'd left my closet door open, as well as my bedroom door, so that lights from the house and from outside would shine into the closet. The closet did have its own light source, one of those light bulbs with a pull string, but I had a lot of trouble reaching it, so I didn't want to bother with it. I recall having just set down my Monopoly box when the closet door slammed shut. Instantly, I shot up and turned around. Without any light from the outside, the closet was pitch black, save for the narrow crack under the door. Uneasy, I called out my brother's name, assuming he was joking with me. There was no reply. I ran toward the door, using the crack of light at the bottom as my guide. Then I scoured the dark for the doorknob. Relief filled me when I found it, until I tried to turn it. It wouldn't budge. It didn't make sense. The closet door didn't have a lock on the inside or outside of it. Why wouldn't it turn? A scared child, I could only assume my older brother was on the other side, holding the doorknob still. We liked to joke with each other as all brothers do, but he had never been one to prank me like this. He was as much scared of the dark as I was. Moments after realizing trying to open the door was futile, I turned back toward the center of the closet and reached my hand upward, looking for the string to the light, or rather, feeling for it. It was difficult for me to reach, but I knew if I could just feel the tip, I could jump up and yank it down, and the darkness would disappear. The longer I stepped blindly through the dark, the faster my heart pounded. Being engulfed in darkness was a nightmare come true. Little did I know things would get worse. I did finally feel the small caplet at the end of the string. Before I could jump up and attempt to yank the cord down, I felt something that took my breath away. An icy cold hand from behind me, it placed itself on my neck and slowly ran up my cheek. I jumped and screamed so loud, so the blood vessels in my face busted. I practically tackled the wall next to me to get around the thing that had touched me, because it had come from the direction of the door. Quickly, I scuttled toward the door and began to pound against it. screaming for anyone that might hear me. Moments later, my dad pulled the door open from the other side. I nearly fell on my face. I crawled out and immediately looked back into the closet. The darkness now cowered away from the light that flowed back through the open door. The closet, except for my board game stack in the back, was empty. My dad picked me up and embraced me and looked at my face. Buddy, did you lock yourself in there? Jeez, look at your face. He wiped tears away from my red cheeks. As he carried me to his and my mom's room to comfort me, I couldn't bring myself to tell him that the door didn't have a lock. But I did manage to tell both of them what happened there, that they blamed it on my intense fear of the dark. Specifically, my mom said being that scared can make you see or feel things that aren't there. She compared it to seeing figures or faces in the dark, and what you're actually looking at is a coat rack or a chair. As much as I loved my parents, I did not agree with a word of what they said. The hand I'd felt so long ago there was vividly real, and I remember it clearly even now. That hand was not my own, nor was it my imagination. Later on, when Dad went to my closet one night to grab one of my board games, I watched him do a double take when he opened the door. It was the first time he'd actually taken a look at it. My dad looked the doorknob over on both sides and raised an eyebrow. "Hey, buddy," he said as he checked out the closet door. "If you go in here, make sure you don't close the door or you might get stuck in there again. There's no lock, so it's probably just warped or something." I nodded and did my best to believe him. Over the next few months, small but weird and creepy things would happen, particularly in that part of the house towards my room. Dirty clothes I'd lay in the bedroom floor would often wind up inside the closet floor the next morning. When I began closing the closet door every night out of fear of the darn thing, it would always be open in the morning. One day when I was out playing after having cleaned my room, my mom called me back inside, absolutely furious. When I went back inside to my room where my mom was, she was fuming because of how trashed my room had become. She thought I hadn't cleaned it, but the state it was suddenly in was worse than I'd ever seen it before. Every drawer in my dresser had been pulled out and dumped out. My blanket and sheet from my bed had been pulled off and tossed over the closet door, which was now open. And inside the closet were hundreds of board game pieces, as someone had dumped each of the boxes out onto the floor. I was flabbergasted, but no matter what I said to my mom, she wasn't having it. She demanded I clean my room properly before I was allowed to come out of the room. Obviously, I was upset, but I did as she said. I cleaned as fast as I could, folded all my clothes again, remade my bed, then stood at the opening to my closet. I couldn't bring myself to walk in there alone, especially after something or someone had just ruined my room. And I know it wasn't me or my brother, because we'd been outside, and why would my parents mess up my room? Deep down, I knew it was the thing in the closet. I stayed in that room 2 hours longer than I had to, unwilling to enter that closet to pick up the board game pieces. But when my stomach began to growl, and the smell of homemade fried chicken filled the air, I forced myself up and into the closet. It took me a few tries, but I managed to jump up and catch the string to the light bulb. So at least I'd have some light if I did get stuck in there again. Quickly, I started to pick up the pieces on the floor. It was a pain matching them up with the right boxes. There's about a dozen different games had been mixed up. Every few seconds, I glanced at the closet door, making sure it stayed open. I thought nothing would happen if that door was open. I thought nothing could happen if the light was on. I was wrong. I picked up the final piece eventually, a small white ball that I'm pretty sure belonged in the Hungry Hungry Hippos box. I threw it in, closed up the box, and turned around. I stopped. A woman stood in the doorway. Her feminine shape made me first think it was my mother, but she was taller than my mother. Her hair was a mess and went down to her ribs. She stood facing away from me in a stained but light blue dress. She appeared to be looking out the windows of my bedroom. My voice failed me. I wanted to speak to her, but I had no idea what to say. I wanted to think it was some long-lost relative coming for a visit that I'd never met before, and I hadn't known was coming. Denial is a powerful thing. The woman breathed in and out so slowly that I didn't hear her first breath until long after I studied her. Her breath was extremely slow and troubled, as if she'd been a smoker for multiple lifetimes. Then she lifted a bony finger and pointed towards one of the windows. I swear I heard her speak then. I think she said, "Such a nice day." Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, my vision was obstructed. I flinched away, first thinking that I'd suddenly gone blind, but as my hands felt up towards my face, I found greasy, messy hair covering my small form. Then, that slow, struggling breathing came from behind me. This woman was no longer in the doorway. She stood right behind me, with her hair draped over me. I screamed then, and I ran forward, where I last saw the open closet door. And Christ, this sounds crazy, but the few feet I ran to escape that closet, each inch of the way I floundered through that hair. Her breathing stayed in the same spot in the closet, but the hair seemed infinite, as if it no longer came from her head, and instead hung from the ceiling. Only when I burst out of the closet did the hair finally come to an end. I turned to shut the door and found once again the closet empty. These are a couple of my most terrifying experiences. What I would eventually refer to as the Witch of Donner. Donner was the name of one of the previous owners of the land. I wish I could say I figured out who she was, that we moved, that it all stopped, but we didn't move, and it never did stop. It would happen randomly, and things might calm down for months at a time, but she was always there, seemingly preferring my side of the house. The experiences only stopped after I moved out at the age of 20. If you want to hear more of these experiences, let me know. I'm sure most of you won't believe me. I wish I could sleep a bit better at night.